Hi there. It's June the 2nd, and today we're concluding our journey through the good news of John. We're in John chapter 21, and we're reading from verses 1 through to 25. This is a very personal postscript, in a sense, that John adds to his good news. It's the encounter of the disciples up in Galilee with the risen Jesus. And we're told that Jesus meets them on the side of the Sea of Galilee. Some of them have decided to go fishing. Among them are Thomas and Nathaniel, who we haven't really seen since the beginning of the story with John, but he makes an appearance at this point. Peter is there, and they all are doing what they know to do, and that is fishing on the Lake of Galilee. And so, as they're fishing, they see a figure on the side of the lake calling to them, hey guys, have you got anything to eat? Have you managed to catch anything? And they say to him, no. And so he tells them to cast their net over the right side of the boat, which they do. And when they do, they suddenly find they have this amazing haul of fish, which they catch at his command. And then John, we assume it's John, the disciple that Jesus loved, the one who leaned his breast, said, it's the Lord. And Peter suddenly wants to get there before they actually manage to get the boat to shore. There's quite a comedy moment here where Peter is he's naked because he's working on the boat with the guys, and he puts on his coat and jumps into the water. It's quite a funny picture to use this, that he actually gets dressed to jump in and get wet, but he's so determined to get to Jesus, and he swims to Jesus. And then the others bring the boats to shore, and they find that the nets haven't broken, and when they count up, they've got 153 fish. And they realise that it is the Lord. And when they get to the shore, they find that Jesus has already made a breakfast for them. You think that with a haul of 153 fish, Jesus might have used one of those, but Jesus already has prepared for them food. And this is very important in the unfolding story of the resurrection of Jesus as well, because Jesus sits and eats with them. And again, back in Luke, it says that Jesus ate fish. Well, this is John's account of Jesus eating with them. This is not a ghost. This is a physical person eating at breakfast with his friends. And then Jesus has this amazing encounter with Peter, which we really need to look behind to the original language to get the impact of what Jesus is saying. After breakfast, Jesus turns to Peter and says, Peter, do you love me? Now, what he says in the Greek is Simoniona agapasme. Agapa, from agapi, this word that means selfless love, giving love. Jesus says to Peter, agapasme, do you love me? Peter replies, philose, I am your friend. Philo means to like, to be close to. So Jesus is asking Peter, do you love me? Peter is replying, well, we're mates, aren't we, Jesus? We're friends. The second time Jesus asks him, agapasme, do you love me, in that selfless way? And Peter again responds, philose, I like you, Jesus, we're mates. And the third time Jesus asks him, this is the key thing, Jesus asks him, Peter, philisme, do you really like me? Are we really friends? And John says that Peter was angry at that point because Jesus asked him the third time, not agapasme, do you love me, but philisme, are we really mates, Peter? Because Peter will be so aware of what he did before Jesus' death, of the denying Jesus 3 times. And here Jesus 3 times is asking Peter if he really loves Jesus, and all Peter can really manage is, we're mates. He doesn't seem to be able to bring himself to say, I love you, Jesus. But each time Jesus speaks to Peter, each of these 3 times, Jesus confirms Peter's calling. He says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs. And then the last thing Jesus says to him in this account is, follow me. The thing he would have said to Peter right at the beginning, follow me, akoluthimi, follow me. And there's this reinstatement of Peter that happens after his having denied Jesus. And Jesus actually said, Peter, Now you do what you want. You are free to choose, but the day will come when you won't be free to choose, and others will lead you where you don't want to go. And John mentions that this is demonstrating the kind of death that Peter was going to die. He was going to die a martyr's death for Jesus. And then there's this final turning of Peter to look at John. We assume it's John. John, the one who leaned on Jesus' breast, the one whom Jesus loved. He doesn't name himself. We also assume that he is the writer of this account, and that's why he's not naming himself. He's self-effacing and not putting himself in the picture, as it were. But Peter says, what about him? What are you going to do about him? And Jesus says, don't you worry about him. If he should live until I come again, what's that to you? Now, it's interesting, remember that John is writing this account. If this is John writing this account, he's actually putting this part in to explain something. It seems that people thought that because Jesus said that, John wasn't going to die. And actually, traditionally, John lived well into towards the end of the century. He lived a long time, even into his 90s. And therefore there was this tradition in the church that he wouldn't die. But John is kind of putting this right by saying, no, Jesus didn't say that. He's not saying I wouldn't die, just that if it was my choice, Jesus said that he didn't die. So he's kind of putting right something that maybe was being said of him that wasn't so. And then lastly, John puts this beautiful statement right at the end of his gospel that says, if all the things that Jesus did were to be written down, I'm sure that the whole world couldn't contain the books that produced. John has sought to be faithful to this amazing story of who Jesus is, the looking behind just the actions, looking into the depths of who Jesus is. He's done it very much in the context of the Jewish festivals and of the journey of Jesus as Messiah of Israel, and he has him at the end of the gospel in this amazing personal encounter. We always need that personal face-to-face encounter with Jesus. He's not distant. He comes close to us. He comes and he, as the Revelation has it, he has a meal with us. He has fellowship with us. And so let's always make room. Let's make room today for more fellowship with the living Jesus. Have a very good June the 2nd.